Call 911.
What's going on?
Call 911 now.
I'm calling. What's going on?
Just call 911.
Okay, I'm calling.
I need a police officer, EMS.
Scott Horn, a respected father, trusted friend, and retired FBI agent, and a brutal crime that would leave an entire community in shock while detectives found themselves chasing shadows. Dozens of clues surfaced, conspiracy theories spread, and investigators sifted through surveillance footage, police body cam recordings, and endless interrogation tapes. Yet, despite it all, justice never came. Instead, the case left behind a haunting silence, filled only with unanswered questions.
My father is under a bunch.
What is that?
It's a GoPro.
I left because I was not going to be beaten up by him.
You know, I have a really hard time believing that happened.
I know, because you're stupid and you don't know how deceptive an FBI agent can be.
The morning of March 16, 2017, started like any other for the Horn family. But as the hours passed, Scott's son, Riley Horn, got worried. He hadn't heard from his 62-year-old father, Scott Allen Horn, a retired FBI agent. So Riley decided to check on him in Laurel, Maryland. Riley brought along a GoPro camera to document the search, never imagining it would capture one of the most haunting discoveries of his life. The footage starts with Riley walking into the property, eagerly calling out to his father with tension, "Dad? Dad?" Even after repeatedly calling out, there was no response. The yard remained still, and then Riley found out something that broke him into pieces. Scott Horn was left dead on the ground in his own yard. The body was partially covered with bushes under a large tarp, but it was clear that it was him. He was drenched in blood with many injuries all over his body. At this point, Riley then called 911. Officers from the Prince George's County Police Department arrived, and they began recording their own documentation on body-worn cameras. Their main priority was to secure the scene and confirm what Riley had already found. The paramedics did rush forward, but quickly confirmed there was nothing they could do. Scott Horn was dead. Now cops found out that this was not an accidental death, but a well-executed homicide. Reports clearly show that Scott was shot once in the neck. A wound investigators say would have immediately paralyzed him. But the horror doesn't end there. His body showed signs of blunt force trauma. There were pieces of firewood scattered near the body, which revealed that it was the weapon used. Detectives were sure that after Scott was shot, his attacker beat him to death with the wood. It was not just a criminal act by the killer, but a brutal one too. And then, the investigators found some crucial details. In the shed, they recovered a bullet casing that fit well with the caliber of Scott's wound. Apart from this, there was blood around the wood chips, which indicates a violent struggle between Scott and the murderer. Now inside the house, police did a welfare check to trace Scott's last movements. Just 8 hours earlier, another patrol officer had been inside on a routine welfare check, finding nothing unusual. Now, with Scott's body lying only a short distance away, questions started to build. How could his death have gone unnoticed for so long? Was the killer waiting for that earlier officer to leave before striking? Even though neighbors had not seen or heard anyone, Riley's GoPro recording stood out, not only showing the moment of discovery, but the immediate result too. The confusion, the shock, and the heartbreaking grief of a family member caught in the middle of a crime scene. It was not a random accident, nor a natural death. The evidence on the ground made it clear someone had purposefully killed the retired FBI agent, shooting him once to disable him, and then beating him to make sure that he would not survive. The clues and theories.
Listen to me. I want you out front on the porch. Have a seat. Have a seat.
You got crime scene tape? Where's the body? We got a couple more units here. Gonna have a potential crime scene.
The initial question was simple. Who would want Scott Horn dead? The evidence left behind on the ground did give some answers, but it remained a mysterious puzzle, difficult to solve. The nature of the attack was itself the first clue. Scott had been shot once in the neck, a precise strike that would have instantly killed him. But rather than leaving the scene, his killer continued the assault, beating him up with pieces of firewood until he was dead. This level of brutality told investigators something important. The crime wasn't random. It was personal. Whoever killed Scott Horn didn't just want him dead, they wanted to make sure he suffered. Even though detectives did find a bullet casing matching the one that Scott was shot with and bloodstains around wood chips, it didn't give them straight answers. There were no fingerprints, no DNA, no clear trail pointing to a suspect. Cops then turned to the closest people in Scott's life, and this was the turning point. Scott's own wife became the prime suspect.
Oh, well, police department. Can you come down here, ma'am?
Yeah. What?
Who else lives here? Anyone else?
My husband.
Your husband?
Their starting point was his estranged wife, Ann Reed Allen. Their marriage had shattered long before 2017. They were separated and locked in bitter fights over finances and property. Neighbors and family members described the relationship as toxic and combative. To the police, this gave Ann a motive. It was not just the broken marriage that made her a suspect. There was more to it. Ann was at home the whole time, while Scott was found dead. But she didn't come out, not even once, to check what was going on. This left the cops in a lot of suspicion. When officers interviewed Ann at the scene, her manner struck many as unusual. Body cam footage showed her reacting with a calm, almost detached air, even as officers explained that her husband had been found dead next door. Neighbors Cindy and Marty later told detectives that they found her lack of visible concern to be unsettling and unusual. It was not the reaction of a grieving wife, but more like the composure of someone who already knew the outcome. To make things trickier, Ann's financial situation came up, and that was her next motive. Scott had recently removed her from his life insurance policy, leaving her with more debt rather than security. While this meant she didn't directly gain from his death, prosecutors suggested anger and resentment over being cut off may have fueled her rage. But defense attorneys would later argue this detail actually undermined the prosecution's case. Why kill someone when the outcome left you worse off? Riley always wore a GoPro around his neck because he was afraid of her. This was a huge turning point for the investigators. With constant fights, assaults, and domestic violence in the house, the couple seemed to have a toxic marriage, eventually leading the children to also hate them. Scott's wallet and cell phone were missing. This made the officers think that it might have been a robbery. But robbers move off quickly. They don't stay behind to shoot, and then beat them up to make sure that they are dead. Now, there were more theories apart from this. Scott Horn was a retired FBI agent. His death was then linked to his career. An enemy was the next suspect. This was again a possibility, but again unsupported. Ann had raised a suspicion that someone might have attacked Scott at a casino that he had been to the previous night. Nothing in Scott's recent life showed that he was being targeted by other cases. And again, the violent, chaotic nature of the attack pointed away from a professional hit. As a shocking surprise to everyone, the next suspect was Ann's boyfriend, Jason Allen Bird. Police looked into his background and possible involvement. At one point, he was charged in connection with the case, but as the investigation progressed, prosecutors dropped the charges due to a lack of evidence. Like Ann, there was nothing physically connecting him to the scene. Theories also came around among neighbors and in the community. Some doubted the killing might have been the result of a burglary gone wrong, though detectives dismissed this quickly. Nothing of value appeared to have been taken from the house, and the excessive violence made little sense in the context of a simple robbery. As cops dug deeper, Ann herself offered theories when questioned. She came up with doubts about possible enemies, burglars, or outsiders. But to detectives, her attempts at deflection seemed more like misdirection than genuine insight. Still, without evidence tying her to the scene, her words alone could not carry the weight of proof.
Detective Henderson?
Where is Scott at?
The last I saw Scott was early this week. I hardly ever see him. He's gone most of the day, every day. He doesn't talk to me. I mean, he won't tell me anything. I don't know what else to tell you.
Have you been outside?
I was outside to put wood on the fire, but that was it.
And you didn't see Scott out there?
No.
Ann's clothes had Scott's bloodstains. Clothes were found in the washing machine with Scott's DNA on them, matching the ones found on the wood chips. Again, there were many theories, but no answer. The bullet, the wood, the blood, and even Ann's unsettling behavior created a lot of suspicion. Yet every theory investigators found circled back to the same frustrating reality. There was no direct evidence linking anyone to Scott Horn's murder. This left prosecutors with a puzzle made of circumstantial pieces, a puzzle that looked convincing at a glance but left too many gaps to be complete. And it would be those gaps that ultimately decided the outcome of the case. By 2018, after more than a year of investigation, prosecutors believed they had built a case strong enough to bring Scott Horn's estranged wife, Ann Reed Allen, to trial. The charges were heavy: first-degree murder, second-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and use of a handgun in a violent crime. If convicted, Ann could have spent the rest of her life in prison. There was a huge, unsettling battle in the courtroom. Prosecutors argued that Ann was the one to be blamed. She had both motive and opportunity. Their narrative was simple but chilling. A bitter, estranged wife, financially strapped, emotionally resentful, and still entangled with Scott despite their separation, had decided to take matters into her own hands. After all, her body language during the investigation was way too calm for a sad wife. The body cam footage made a huge twist. Jurors were shown body camera footage from the day Scott's body was found. On screen, Ann's reactions, or lack thereof, played out in real time. Prosecutors described her as cold, detached, even calculating. They highlighted how she offered speculative theories about Scott's death, almost as if she were trying to guide detectives away from herself. This, they argued, was not the manner of a shocked and grieving spouse. The state also paid too much attention to the issue of motive. They pointed to Ann's poor financial situation and her removal from Scott's life insurance policy. Though she would not inherit wealth from his death, prosecutors argued that bitterness and resentment could always be seen as powerful motivators. They suggested that anger over financial loss, combined with years of marital strain, had pushed her to a breaking point. What do you think? Even with these arguments, the prosecution was still missing something: a complete absence of direct physical evidence tying Ann to the crime. No DNA, no fingerprints, no weapon, no eyewitnesses. The forensic trail was thin, and much of the case rested on interpretation rather than concrete proof. Ann's defense team caught up on this weakness. From the very start, they pictured the state's case as one built on assumptions and emotion, not facts. Ann was not physically strong enough to kill Scott. They reminded the jury that Ann suffered from mobility issues, making it unlikely she could have carried out such a physically demanding murder, shooting her husband, dragging his body, and then beating him with firewood. They also paid solid attention to the fact that Scott was a 62-year-old retired FBI agent, not an easy target, and that no evidence showed Ann was capable of overpowering him. The defense also attacked the supposed financial motive. Yes, Ann had been removed from the life insurance policy, but that meant she had no financial benefit from his death. If anything, his murder left her worse off. The defense used this point to argue the crime simply didn't make sense if Ann were the killer. The prosecution then tried to bring in Ann's boyfriend, Jason Allen Byrd, as a co-conspirator, but this angle fell off before trial.
Second person has been arrested and charged in the death of a retired FBI special agent who was killed back in March. Laurel police arrested 42-year-old Jason Allen Byrd of Westminster Monday in connection to the death of Scott Horn. The 62-year-old was found in the backyard of a home on Patuxent Road. Byrd now faces several charges, including first-degree murder.
Byrd's charges were dropped due to lack of evidence, leaving the state's theory with a significant hole. Without him, the narrative of conspiracy appeared far less convincing. Over the course of the trial, jurors also heard from neighbors, detectives, and Scott's own children. Riley Horn, who had found his father's body while wearing a GoPro camera, provided emotional testimony. The footage of his discovery, raw and disturbing, underscored the brutality of the crime, but did little to identify the killer. In closing arguments, the state urged jurors to see the circumstantial evidence as a web that, when viewed as a whole, left no reasonable doubt. The defense countered by insisting that suspicion was not proof and that the case lacked the hard evidence necessary to convict. After many deliberations, the jury reached its final verdict. Ann Reed Allen was left free of all charges. The decision reflected the central flaw in the prosecution's case. While the circumstantial evidence raised eyebrows, it never crossed the line into certainty. Without proof beyond a reasonable doubt, jurors could not convict. For Scott Horn's family, the outcome was devastating. The trial had promised closure, but instead left them with a sad reality. The man they loved was murdered in his own yard, yet no one would be held accountable. For Anne, the acquittal meant freedom, but her reputation remained forever clouded by suspicion. And for investigators, the trial's end marked a sobering truth. Despite years of work, despite the pile of circumstantial evidence, Scott Horn's murder remained officially unsolved. Scott Horn's story ends where it began, quietly, in his own backyard. But the unanswered questions surrounding his death continue to echo louder than ever. A respected retired FBI agent, a man who had dedicated his life to solving puzzles and uncovering the truth, became the center of a mystery that even the justice system could not resolve. The brutal way he died, shot, dragged, and beaten, it all points to rage. But whose rage was it? The question is no longer just who killed Scott Horn, but will we ever truly know? Anne Reed Allen walked out of court a free woman, cleared of all charges. To the jury, the state simply hadn't proved its case. But to many, her acquittal did not erase suspicion. Did she truly have nothing to do with Scott's death? Or did she outsmart investigators, leaving behind just enough doubt to keep the law from catching up to her? The theories don't end with Anne. Some still wonder if Scott's lifestyle, or even secrets from his past career, caught up with him. Was it a robbery gone wrong, a grudge carried out by someone from his FBI years? Or was it, as prosecutors insisted, a crime born from fights and quarrels within his own family? The most haunting part of this case isn't just the brutality, it's the silence that followed. No arrests, no new leads, no clear answers. For Scott's children, the weight of that silence is more than unbearable. They lost their father in the most violent way possible, and then they watched as the trial ended without justice. And so, nearly a decade later, the murder of Scott Horn remains unsolved, sitting in that chilling category of cases where evidence isn't enough, and truth never fully comes to light. It leaves us with one haunting thought. If a man who once hunted criminals for a living can be killed in his own backyard, and no one is ever held accountable, what does that say about justice itself? In the end, the murder of Scott Horn isn't just a story of one man's tragic end. It's a story about the questions that still hang in the air, about rage, betrayal, and the terrifying reality that sometimes, even when the evidence seems to point in one direction, the truth remains locked away forever. And maybe that's the scariest part of all, because the person who killed Scott Horn is still out there.